Practice area. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're located. This is our sixth webinar on our ongoing series on high quality dual language immersion. Today, we're going to focus on one of the hearts of quality, and that's having a quality workforce to support the implementation of dual language programs. So today's conversation is going to focus on workforce, credentialing, and professional development. My name is Dr. Sigrid Soroboykin. I'm the Director of Language Justice and Learning Equity at the Children's Equity Project at Arizona State. And I'm really excited that we get to do this work in conjunction with the Century Foundation. We'll go to our next slide. Now, we couldn't do any work without money. Money is important, so we have to thank our funders that make this work possible, the W. Kellogg Foundation and the Heisen Simmons Foundation. This work is based on two things that we have been looking at in the last couple of years that relate to equity, and that is access, who gets in the door, and does it represent the children in the community, with a real intentional focus on making sure that emergent bilinguals or English learners have access to these programs. And then the second part is like, we don't just want kids to enter programs, we want them to enter high quality programs. And that's what we're gonna be focusing on today. And we'll provide a link to these reports in the chat. Speaking of chat or the Q&A, you're welcome to, as we're talking and having this conversation today, please tell us where you're from and your name. And most importantly, feel free to ask questions or comments as we will be addressing them throughout our conversation. I'm really excited and honored to have this conversation with amazing colleagues and individual heroes of their work in the different parts of the United States that they're in. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, starting with Jerry. Jerry, do you mind introducing yourself?
Of course, such an honor to be here. My name is Jerry Chaffee. I am the founder of Dreamers Academy, which is a K-5 dual language public charter school in Sarasota, Florida, the first program of its kind in our county and in most of Florida. It'll be an inspiration to expand it because we really need it in our state.
Thank you, Jerry. How about you, Jill?
Hi, I'm Jill Singh. I am here in Central Phoenix in the Osborne School District. I'm the head of school for our Montessori program, which is now the very first in the state of Arizona dual language Montessori program. Yay!
Yay! So exciting.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Oliva Olsen. I'm Chief Innovation Officer at Advanced College, and I'm also the co-founder of the Language Justice Institute.
So happy to have you. And Dina?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dina Castro. I'm a professor of early childhood at Boston University and the director of the Institute for Early Childhood Wellbeing. Very happy to be here.
Bienvenida. Again, we have you many times. We appreciate you. And Drew.
Hi, everyone. I'm Drew Godair. I'm an assistant professor of community psychology at UNC Charlotte and formerly the research and evaluation director from Charlotte Bilingual Preschool. We had to work a lot with data and workforce development and things like that.
Thank you. It's exciting to have different leaders in the field. We have administrators have educators, we have researchers. It takes all of us. So I think that's important to remember. And I'm really excited that we have Jerry and Jill that have programs in states that aren't always friendly to dual language education. I think that's really important. With that, we'll go to our next slide. And for those of us who are joining this webinar series for the first time, I just want to orient us to a larger picture of what we're talking about today. We developed a framework on how to implement how to define dual language immersion for the youngest children. So starting with infants and toddlers, preschoolers, and children in the early elementary grades. So from kindergarten to second grade. We did this by looking at 7 dimensions of quality, starting with programmatic structures, language allocation, curriculum instruction and pedagogy, workforce credentialing and professional development, which is why we're here today, assessment, family leadership and engagement, and services and inclusion for children with disabilities. So our report takes a very deep dive into all of these dimensions, but we wanted to make sure that today we focus on workforce credentialing and professional development. That will go with our next slide. So speaking of, this is just a very, very small sample of the quality indicators that we can find on this section of the report. And just at a high level, we're going to talk about it way more today. Some sample indicators of quality include having an articulated plan of recruitment and retention of the workforce, where we're really intentional about making sure that the teachers that are chosen represent the community in which the schools are in. Another thing is we know that in early child specifically, we have a huge wealth of paraprofessionals and parents that can speak the language that's usually the partner language of instruction to English, and they're really an untapped resource. So it's important to provide ways for these individuals that are already fluent in the language and that know children from a cultural match, giving them pathways to become educators, even if they don't speak English. And speaking of language, we know that equity doesn't just impact children, it also impacts the workforce. So another quality indicator is making sure that the teachers of the language that's spoken other than English for instruction are paid equitably. So sometimes even more than monolingual teachers. That's very important for retention, as many times these teachers have to do more work. They have to translate things because they're not commercially available. They also bring a cultural connection. All those things cost money, and it's important to pay them as well. And last but not least, being a dual language educator is very hard. You need to know everything that every teacher needs to know, plus everything related to bilingual education. And so it's important that any professional development plan involves both. And this is just a very small sample. You're welcome to read more on our report, but we also have the privilege of speaking about this topic now from our experts. So with that, we'll move on to our next slide. So we're going to start with 3 buckets. The first one is teacher credentials and competencies. Like I mentioned before, it's really difficult to have a dual language program if you don't have a workforce, right? And we need to make sure that we're able to recruit and retain qualified teachers, right? We know from research that there's significant barriers for teachers to receive credentialing, especially in early childhood, such as, not having access to programming that's in their language, really inflexible course scheduling that contradicts their work schedules, lack of funding, and limited pathways, right, for paraprofessionals. And so kind of thinking about all that, we know all the barriers, but before we talk about the barriers, Dina, can you talk a little bit more about, what are the core skills that bilingual educators need to know in order to implement high quality dual language education? And I'll ask you a second question after that.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that we should begin by identifying the teacher's language ideologies. So I think that's the first point, and because that will influence their dispositions to work with these children, and also what are the approaches. If they need to have an understanding in, specifically when we're talking about dual language education, of when we are asking teachers to implement practices, and we know this from research on teacher preparation, and that if teachers don't have the dispositions to implement the program, you can give them information about, the pedagogical, the educational practices, and they will go through, attend classes, and they will prepare. They will have the preparation, but they will not put those into practice. So we need to start there. So identifying that and try to, develop an understanding of the relationship between language, culture, and identity, and awareness also of the socio-political aspects that are related to language policies and language education. I think those are, to me, the first step. That would allow then teachers to identify their own biases and start working towards That's the first step, identify and trying to not have those and getting the way into the implementation of the practices that the children that need to be in place for effective teaching or high quality teaching for the students. Then we'll go into knowledge. Teachers need to have a good understanding of bilingual development, biliteracy and bilingualism, and how that develops in young children in particular. That will help them then move into the pedagogy of why is that, they're knowing how bilingual children develop and learn, then we could introduce the pedagogical aspect of it, so the instructional practices, right? Those go together. Another aspect, and I'm trying to be very succinct here because we could talk about each of these a lot for a long time. But then another aspect that I think I want to make sure that I mention is assessment, because that's an area that normally we don't pay a lot of attention to. And then teachers have to conduct assessment to gather data. And I'm not talking only about standardized assessments, I'm talking authentic approaches in general. So all of the different approaches that we use to collect information about how children are doing in schools. And that needs to happen bilingually. So that's another aspect. So that's so we need to make sure that teachers understand that and are able to conduct bilingual assessments to guide their practice. I think those are the most important pieces. And well, no, I don't want to forget another one that's very important is how to work with families. Working with families and communities, and especially of these bilingual children. And we always talked in our field about building partnerships with, homeschool partnerships. But when we are talking about bilingual families, I think this becomes even more critical, because families may hold themselves, fears and concerns about their children growing up or becoming bilingual and biliterate. And sometimes they will be concerned about even enrolling their kids into a dual language program. So I think it's very important that we work with families, and also, of course, to start by identifying these families' funds of knowledge, so that we can incorporate those into our instructional practices. I think I will just mention very key aspects, and of course, there's a lot more to say about this, but I think I will leave it there to start the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. That's so helpful. Now we know just a small sample of why we need to pay these teachers so much money. It's not easy. And I really appreciated how you started by the linguistic ideologies and the bias, and really understanding like how to create an equitable system in a classroom. I think that's important. We focus so much on the knowledge, but that's not enough. Like the content area, how to foster language development and how to implement bilingual instruction, that's just not enough, right? We need those layers of understanding bias and sociopolitical context, because it does matter for the kids that we work with. We need to understand how to empower families and work with them in ways that are culturally and linguistically sustaining. And we need assessment. And we have our previous our previous webinar was on assessment. So I welcome you to look at those as well. I think those are great points. And then something that always comes up as we kind of summarize, like there's so many skills these educators need to know, then there comes the question of credentialing. So I'm going to jump it back to you, Dina. Is there a particular credentialing for dual language educators that matters the most in early childhood?
I think we know that in general, unfortunately, most early programs that prepare early childhood educators do not target or do not include content related to preparing these teachers to work with bilingual, multilingual children. And I think that's definitely something that we need to change in the country. We know that most teachers will have bilingual children in their classrooms. So regardless of if the program is designed as a dual language education program or not, all teachers in this country need to be prepared to minimally to address the needs of these children. So that's one point. So definitely one way to address this limitation in the teacher's preparation is to create these credential programs, and that could supplement their preparation. So I know that there are some states that already have that in place, like California and Texas. Not very sure if those are particularly focusing on young children, because we know that those bilingual education programs prepare teachers in elementary education, but not necessarily focusing on the very young children. So I'm talking about 0 to 5. And so that's a big gap in the field, I think, but there are other programs, and I know that there are some, and we will be learning today about some of those that are happening. There are our colleagues here and myself. We are right now offering a credential also for early educators. But the purpose is that one. Definitely we need to add these credentials to support the preparation of the areas, address the limitations in teacher preparation to work with bilingual children.
Thank you. That's so helpful. And I think that idea of having alternate ways of teachers to get credentialing, especially when the teachers may speak a non-English language and may have full lives and are busy, I think it's incredibly important. I want to highlight a report that just came out a few weeks ago that our colleagues, Dr. Connor Williams and Jonathan Zabala, developed at the Century Foundation, where they examined a new policy in California to credential transitional kindergarten teachers, because that's something that they're opening up in California, which is a good thing. But what's found is that there is some inequities in that, because now we have early child educators that have years of experience, and they speak multiple languages that they could then become credential transitional kindergarten teachers for dual language programs. But there's a barrier because they need to be able to clock up, I think, like more 200 hours, additional hours, and do all these other things that if they already have full workloads, right, and they may not speak English fluently, or maybe they just not come from the English, that creates a barrier. So we're going to put that link in the chat. I invite you to look at it because it really relates to this conversation. And with that, we're going to move over to teacher training as our next conversation. We've talked a little bit about the barriers to credentialing, and now we're going to talk about 2 innovative programs. I think in these times, I am enjoying hearing things that give me hope. So let's thank our next group of speakers for the hope. I really appreciate it. We're going to start talking to Carola. She's the Chief Innovation Officer of Advance College. And Carola, you and your team have been doing an amazing job. You know that. We always love telling you that, but we'll remind you in a public forum that you all co-developed a BA program for early childhood educators. Can you share a little bit more about the program? Like, what are the goals? What is the program of study like? All the things. We want to hear from your program.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Sigrid. And let me start by telling you that I'm honored to be here with you, but also to share this space with such esteemed colleagues and experts. So with that, I'm excited to share about our program and how we operationalize the support for the ECE workforce as they earn the BA degree, because that's what we focus on, is on making that, realizing that for our for educators in the field. So let me introduce Advance. We're a private nonprofit college. We offer a BA degree in early childhood studies, and we focus on children from birth to age 5. Our degree is offered in English and in Spanish, and we serve students or educators who most of them are adult multilingual learners, but we offer 2 different distinct pathways. So we have a lower division pathway where they start as cohorts and stay with us for 4 years. And then we offer an upper division pathway for transfer students who stay with us 2 years. we are also a registered apprenticeship sponsor, so we're piloting this program to bridge learning and practice through what's called the work-based learning model. We build strong relationships and employer partnerships, and this is with the earn while you learn approach, so that they can the students gain hands-on experience, they earn wages, and they advance in their career as they're completing their BA degree. So that's one part. Then the other is for students to come in and be successful. We've developed something, we created the Advanced Bridge. So they come in before starting their program, they work on earning badges to learn about Zoom technology, digital literacy, and other platforms. Since they're going to be recording themselves and their teaching at their settings, whether it's a family childcare home or in a classroom. Then the model follows a thematic semester. All of this is critical because we build this program to make sure it is cohesive and it's that they can succeed in it and they're not taking courses here and there and for a long time, right? So our model follows a thematic semester schedule, and they have 2 subject matter courses, a writing in the discipline course, and a community of reflective practice with our practicum. And this is really important because they're working, they're taking classes at night, but it's rigorous, but it's consistent. And part of the pedagogy is that students engage in these reflective cycles where they assess their knowledge, record their teaching practices, upload and reflect and provide feedback and receive feedback. Then they refine their work and they re-record themselves. So we are seeing their actual learning, understanding by demonstrating what they've learned, right? Throughout the years that they're with us and throughout the courses. So it's giving us a lot of feedback on what works in higher ed. And all of this can seem quite complex, but it's actually something that works beautifully in practice. And we're learning and we're perfecting what we're doing. But I want to highlight that something you said, Dina, earlier, is that all our courses start with self-reflection on personal funds of knowledge and cultural wealth. And that everything that they're learning, it all starts with their unique experiences, what they know, what they've lived through, their practices, cultural ways of being, their identity, and that this is critical for both the professional and their personal growth. So I know I have a few minutes, but I want to highlight the BA degree in Spanish because it's such a critical program in preparing bilingual educators. And we know bilingual education is the North Star, not just for California, but for the nation. And it's quite unique what we've created to be able to teach in Spanish, but also know that we're preparing them to teach in bilingual programs and that they're developing their English language skills as well, because they're going to be teaching in 2 languages. So all the courses are offered in a semester in Spanish with 1 course, the writing and the discipline course. That one's delivered in English, but with home language support. And let me know if I go over, Sigrid, of my time. But there's a course that I'd love to highlight. It's called the Language for Early Childhood Educators. And it's one that focuses on the building blocks of language, like the essential linguistics, that is a critical class for our students to learn how to model language, scaffold when they have language interactions with children, and how they expand, right, children's language skills. So I call it the bilingualizing of our instruction. So how we use this ELD, dual language, translanguage practices to make sure students are not only learning the concepts and developing the skills, but they're also developing language skills themselves and know how it applies in their practice. So I could continue with lots of different ways in which we provide comprehensive supports for our students to be successful in the program. But these are some of the highlights that I think were worth mentioning first.
That's so excellent. I know I want to hear each of you talk forever. I wish we had that kind of time, but I really appreciate what you said about making sure that teachers know language, right? Because it's hard to expect teachers to become bilingual educators if they don't know how to, like, our children need to learn language, and that means teachers need to know language. They need to understand the parts of language and how to facilitate that, among all the other wonderful things that you do. That's exciting. Speaking of exciting things, I remember when I first met Drew and I was like, this is the most amazing thing. So now we get to hear it out loud. We know, right, that research tells us that when it comes to dual language education, parents and community members and also paraprofessionals are such strong assets already available in the community. To me, like, yes, there's a workforce shortage, but also maybe there's an imagination shortage as well. And so we know that parents, community members, etc., are an untapped resource when it comes to recruiting and retaining the workforce that we need to implement high quality dual language education. And as you mentioned earlier, you know, you're part of a Charlotte Bilingual Preschool, and you all developed a program to train caregivers to become credential teachers. So can you tell us a little bit more about the program? What does that process of training caregivers looks like? How is it funded? And then what outcomes have you seen so far?
Absolutely. I will try to cover all of those questions. I think it's the same, another program that I could talk about and have talked about for hours at a time. But I want to reiterate too what Carolo mentioned, that it's an honor to be here with such an esteemed panel and such incredible people doing amazing work. And I'm always excited to talk about some of the incredible work happening at Charlotte Bilingual Preschool. As Sigrid mentioned, we started. So this program is designed to train caregivers from our family community. So Charlotte Bilingual is a dual language preschool that primarily serves children from Spanish-speaking homes. And in 2020, we were looking for ways to grow our impact, expand our reach to try to support more children in the Charlotte community. And we kept kind of going back and forth on how can we make this possible? How can we access the teachers? And one of the things that kind of jumped out, I don't know if we necessarily discovered it or if our families initiated this, but we had 11 family members started taking an early education course in Spanish, and it kind of just hit us in the face, like the talent is there, the skills are there, we just need to be there to support that pathway, make that pathway possible. So we started working with the community college in Charlotte to provide initial coursework in early child education in Spanish. And we provide some navigational support to kind of help our family members enroll in those courses if they're interested, access scholarships. We were honored to work with the Maracas Foundation and a few other local foundations to provide funding support for students who are initiating this pathway. And so after those 11 students started, it took about a year and a half, and over 150 students had taken those initial courses. So there was a ton of excitement. Many of those aspiring teachers were teachers in their home countries. They had prior education experience. Some had more advanced degrees, bachelor's, master's from their home countries. So one of the things we found was that there are diverse pathways for each student. And in our role related to coursework, it really became how do we help our family members access the pathway that makes the most sense for them, and navigate some of the structural barriers that might exist. It might not always be seen. So barriers related to language, but also just feeling comfortable in a higher education space in the United States. the digital divide. Digital literacy was a major barrier that we identified with our families. So how do we help them kind of navigate those processes, access scholarships, access some of those additional supports to be able to take courses? How do we help them transfer their credentials from another country, translate and transfer their prior degrees, things like that, to help them get on the most efficient pathway that will get them into classrooms in the future. Alongside that, we also realized that, I think, as Dina mentioned, one of the areas, not all educator training programs provide high quality support related to dual language education and best practices for bilingual learners. So what we decided to do was create an apprenticeship program where we invite a smaller group of students who are earning their credentials to be paid, participate in classroom activities, basically be a third teacher in our dual language classrooms. And we have like a scaffolded process over the course of the year where these apprentice teachers go from kind of observing, helping out with tasks, kind of prepare activities at the beginning of the year, to then leading small group, large group, active reading, and basically being full lead teachers by the end of the year. And they participate in weekly trainings with our incredible coaches and our principal to build their skills related to active reading, bilingual development, supporting bilingual learners with diverse needs and strengths, things like that. So we've done focus groups, we've connected with our apprentices to talk about their training, what they've been learning, how it's been going. And it's always fun to just hear them pinpoint different things that they've learned throughout the year. And we always end with a question of like, do you feel prepared to lead your own dual language classroom? And I think we've been at 100% yes for the past 2 or 3 years, and just that confidence to move into that career is always great to see. And then one other thing to note is the importance of community developed through the program, where among our apprentices, but also among our families taking coursework and moving into more advanced degrees. So they might start in Spanish with this initial course sequence and then move into the primarily English associate's program, or move to UNC Charlotte to pursue bachelor's or master's degree more in English. But developing that community of support helps. I think a key piece of this program is to help open the door, and that's what our teachers always say, is this opens the door to an opportunity. They develop the strengths, access support, and develop this community to then be able to move forward and achieve their educational and professional goals. And in doing so, we get more bilingual teachers, especially more trained with best practices for dual language learners, into our preschool program, but also to other preschool programs in the area.
So
I'll pause there because I probably went over time.
No, you're fine. I know it's hard. I want to hear everything, but I think that you said so many good things. They were all great. One thing, there's a couple of things that stood out to me because they align so well with the research that we have found on recruitment and retention of dual language workforce. So I really like what you said about, supporting candidates to by providing them with all the things that they need, right? Like identifying the structural barriers, whether it's funding, whether it's like not knowing how to work in the digital, or like all those other things that people may not think about. I think that's such a great, excellent point. The other thing that stands out to me is like that cohort approach, which we know is huge in terms of recruitment and retention, like having people that look like you, that you're, I call it quote unquote like trauma bonding, right? Like I remember like going to graduate school and like those people were like my people, because nobody else will understand you as well as those people going through it. And when it got hard, we're like, we can do hard things, and we kept going. And I think that that's really important, especially for people who may have never seen themselves as college students, right? And I think it's important. And then another thing I would like to highlight is the way that you're able to adapt the training and credentialing pathway based on who the candidate is. I think that's really important as well. There's so many other things too, but if you're listening, write those things down. Those things are really powerful. Speaking of powerful, now we're going to transition to our next slide, and we're going to highlight another area that's related to this workforce topic, and that's professional development. Up next, we have Jerry. Jerry, you are the fierce founder. That's the best way I can describe you after reading you. The fierce founder of Dreamers Academy, a dual language elementary charter school in Sarasota, Florida. If you know anything about Florida, I'm from Florida, so I can say that. We know that there isn't a state-issued bilingual education certification, and there are few dual language programs. So like, just for context, so we know how hard this was to do. Let me ask you a few questions. Since you were the founder, I imagine you had a vision of like everything, right? Like from the wall color, like who the students would be, who the teachers would be. Like, that's so exciting that you could dream this up. No pun intended. But how did you, like, as you were beginning to have this program, how did you start selecting the teachers at Dreamers? And what, like, I imagine not all teachers maybe were dual language educators initially. So like, how did you train them up to become able to really implement high quality practices? And then what types of professional development programming have you all done at Dreamers to make sure that the children, I'm going to say this, I'm sure that Jerry will also say it, but within, I think, is this the third year or fourth year?
Fourth year. We just started
year.
our fourth year. Yep. And we started K-2, but now this year we have K-5. So we'll have 2 graduations. It's very exciting.
Yeah, so still a baby, but that's a smart baby. This smart baby had one of the highest math scores in the district and the state of Florida. So I just wanted to like start off with that because I think it relates a lot to the type of professional development that you all do. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Sure. This is a great discussion. I'm glad to be. You know, I have to start by saying that I had this dream, but I could tell you, I have learned so much from our head of school, Dr. Kathy Rodriguez. She started her career as a clinical psychologist. So she approaches leadership from a wellness perspective that I've been in education for a while, but I hadn't seen quite, you know, that approach implemented. She has created a human-centered processes which prioritize the happiness of our teachers and students. And it starts with recruitment. The most important thing we look for is a great attitude, potential, and humility. Our leadership team has built a positive culture centered in collaboration, continuous improvement, and collective efficacy. And if you're at all familiar with organizational and leadership theory, this is like what's really hot right now. Well, we're just doing it almost intuitively. So we're looking for things that cannot be taught. So screening becomes very important. We've developed a 2-part interview process, and we start with a virtual interview we have 7 questions designed to extract attributes such as, what is your teaching philosophy? Do you love children? Believe it or not, that's an important thing to try to extract from teachers. Do they believe that all children can learn? Do they have a positive attitude? And if they pass that, then we have them design a lesson with our director of curriculum and instruction, and then come to our school. Most of the people we interview are from out of state. So they actually come to our school to deliver the lesson that they've planned in conjunction with our team in one of our classrooms. And believe it or not, the students love it. They know that this person wants to be in our school and that they're being tested because we've got, you know, our team there, and they love being a part of it all. So after that, we debrief and we make a decision. And this process gives us enormous amount of information. We can see how they engage with the students. We can see how they collaborate with other teachers and administration, how they bring their personality into the work, you know, what type of energy they will contribute to our Dreamers family, to see if there's a fit. Now, once they're in, professional development becomes critical to keeping them engaged, happy, and relaxed. So in our 4 years of existence, we have had 100% teacher retention. And each year, more teachers become highly effective because of the supports and the coaching we have put in place, and also the pay for performance scheme, which is like, you know, I find that, everybody says they have a pay for performance scheme, but they don't really use it to motivate. I mean, if you have teachers that are moving from partially effective to effective to highly effective, you should compensate them. So I'll just throw that in. That's a whole other topic that I think we should cover in a webinar. But so dual language immersion, we know it's a rigorous model, and our teachers, they're coming from all over the nation. Most of them are in traditional English only school, and they're not used to the supportive and growing community of a bilingual school. Many are bilingual, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can teach in Spanish. The best teachers to train for that role, we've found, are Spanish certified teachers, because they understand the grammar and the structure, but unfortunately we can't put them at the head of a classroom because they need an elementary education certificate. But we can offer them a position as a paraprofessional, and then help them become certified teachers. And many of them are very interested in that. We just find the way to help them financially or with mentorship. We're working with a lot of universities in Florida, and there's a lot of programs that we've discovered that will support teachers, especially bilingual ones, with scholarships. They apply and they think we teach Spanish, but they don't realize we teach in Spanish. I mean, that's a distinction that a lot of applicants don't realize. So as far as professional development, Dr. Rodriguez is, this is just what she loves to do. She's an instructional coach first and foremost, and she started an initiative our first year called Mentor Connect. It's a professional learning community where teachers, they plan and grow together. They analyze student data. They incorporate their innovative practices. Mind you, that their experiences are so diverse. They problem solve and continuous improvement. And we're constantly innovating. We really try to create a psychologically safe environment so that they can feel like they can contribute and participate. At the beginning of the year, we survey our teachers and try to learn what it is that they want help with. So our entire evaluation process is much more of an edifying, collective way of learning. Then we also assess what the needs are of the school, because of course, we're tested every year, so there is that. And based on our mission and our learning goals, we develop the PD and the workshops, and those are all customized to our school. So it's program specific human development, human capital development and investment. And we've actually this year, yes, we convinced our district to actually code it so they could be counted as, with their PD units that they need to do. So that took a long time, but we got that done. We do class walkthroughs and observations and individual feedback sessions to follow up on that training. And a lot of times our teachers actually request that because they're trying some of the things that they're learning and they want to make sure that they're doing it right. So it's not a combative process. We've actually trained them to know that we're all doing this together. One thing I want to throw out there is there's structural things that people don't think about that really can set a program back. A big structural difference that we implemented, a difference between us and other schools, is that we have embedded an hour and a half of planning time in every day for every teacher. They have 45 minutes at the beginning of the day where we don't put a student there. They could use it any way they want. And then they have 45 minutes every day to plan, to grade, to collaborate. I think that psychology background makes it so that right from the beginning, Dr. Rodriguez said, our teachers need to be happy and we need to have them leaving between 3:30 and 4. She'll actually walk the halls and say, why are you still here? Let me know. And some teachers want to stay longer, and that's okay. But she just wants them to go home, take care of themselves, take care of their loved ones. And they should have enough time during the day to do what they need to do. That's administration and leadership's, job to make sure that that's happening. So there's a lot of things that make a DLI program successful, but I would say that keeping our teachers happy and engaged is probably the most important one. I've thrown a lot of things out there. I hope I answered the question, but it's been a great experience, and our teachers are awesome. And this year we have about 40% of our teachers that are highly effective, which is the highest tier. They get a 4% increase in addition to all the other increases they get. And we started where our first year, we kind of moved about 10% of them. So those teachers become mentors. There's a financial and a motivational incentive for them to totally become part of the team and help the other ones that come along. So it's been great.
That's great to hear. I really appreciate, I mean, the focus on teachers' mental health, like their well-being, that's a big topic at a national level. You know, during the pandemic, that came up a lot, but I think it's always been a thing, and it's incredibly impressive that you've had 100% retention. I think that just speaks to all the things that are necessary to support teachers. Another thing that I really like that you said is that you actually have intentional planning time. That's even more important in a dual language setting where you have to have coordinated instruction. And many of the times it's a co-teaching model. And how can you expect that to be quality if you don't give teachers time to plan together? I mean, we can go on and on. I could talk to all of you. In fact, I have talked to all of you for at least an hour at a time. So I'm going to move on. But I think these are all it's so helpful to put a report in context, and you're all doing that. So I really appreciate it. Speaking of context, we're gonna hear from Jill, another voracious, brave soul, because they're doing the hard work of dual language instruction in states that aren't friendly to dual language instruction. Jill, you work in Arizona, and we know, and just the fact that you've been leading and co-leading a dual language Montessori public school in Arizona. It's so exciting and important. We always, you know, I personally envision a world where we can layer really effective practices and pedagogy. So in my dream world, we have a child-centered approach like Montessori. That's also dual language. And I really appreciate the fact that you actually do that work. Again, kind of similar to what we were listening from Jerry, as you're recruiting a workforce for a Montessori dual language program, I can imagine that sometimes you have someone who knows a lot about dual language, and sometimes someone who knows a lot about Montessori. Now, I imagine that you can't wait 2 years for them to become experts on both before you start giving them the chances to teach. So can you talk to us a little bit more about what does it look like when you recruit an educator that may know something, maybe an expert on one topic or one area, but not so much in the other area? Can tell us what that looks like, and what are some factors that you consider in terms of teacher preparation or even hiring? And like we asked Jerry, what does professional development look like specifically in a Montessori dual language program?
Yeah, so first off, one of the things that our key preparation for us are having those credentials in an approved Montessori training program, whether it be, there's a few programs you hear more often, like AMI, the Association Montessori International, which I am, which is more of the traditional, AMS, which is the American Montessori Society, and then MACD, which is the Montessori Accreditation Council for Teacher Education. So you have to have a certification in one of those. The state licensing piece can be really tricky because the state of Arizona does not recognize Montessori as a licensed area. So in the past, our superintendent was working with our previous state superintendent of public instruction on this. Unfortunately, she was not reelected to continue this work, so it's kind of like a wah, wah, wah. And it's kind of hanging there right now. And so that's still kind of getting looked at. So those are the three main preparation areas or training centers. If a candidate is not licensed, we do have the ability to emergency certify them, and then they will start the process within a certain time to start working on that licensure through like a university program that is relevant and feasible to them. Our school district does work with, in the past, has worked with ASU and Northern Arizona University as well. So it's been tricky, but we are making it. We are figuring it out. And it's interesting because, you know, we are fortunate to have, like on the professional development side, we are fortunate to have the oldest dual language program in the state of Arizona in a public school district for which I taught kindergarten. And so with that, we do have the expertise of a language acquisition specialist who works for the district. So she works with students who are learning English, and then also, our other bilingual students who might be in a Montessori program as well. So she supports our, her job in general also supports our desire to build our new Montessori program, which, as I had mentioned before, is the first ever Montessori dual language program in the state of Arizona in a public school district. So the dual language teachers, the Montessori dual language teachers and I, and actually even the old preschool teachers that I supported when I ran that program, we meet with a specialist, Alexis, her name is, on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, to go over topics and needs that are relevant to the program in general for dual language education, but then we hone in on how to support those dual language learners in the Montessori setting. And sometimes it can be really difficult because we're pretty unique in the state of Arizona. There's not a lot like us. And so we've kind of gotten resourceful. And so I feel lucky that there are some excellent webinars and online resources through Bilingual Montessori. And the new one I just learned about is Rising Tide. They have a lot of professional development opportunities, and some of their webinars feature similar goals that are relevant to our work, especially because there aren't programs like ours, but it is growing. And so we are lucky that at least we can turn to some of those resources for support. So those are certain things that I do just on the professional development end. But then for my own, resourcefulness, I'm kind of scrappy about things. I've started a recent collaboration with the state of Georgia and their program based off of the Century Foundation article that Jonathan wrote about us. So their program manager for the Montessori Partnerships for Georgia is looking to develop more of a dual language program. So she reached out to me. And then additionally, I have to give a shout out to Montessori in the public sector. And specifically Seth Webb. I don't know if he's here. He was at another one, but I am so thankful for him, who he's the director of school services. So he's a great sounding board, giving me ideas as well. So I feel very hopeful and lucky as we continue this journey forward, as we just kind of tap into new support and development as well. I know one of the other things that you had we'd kind of talked about is what I do to support teachers who might be learning that new pedagogy with Montessori methods. And really, even though I'm not a primary preschool certified teacher in Montessori, my certification is elementary. I think what does help is that many of our teachers here were once dual language teachers in the preschool that I just supported. I wasn't stealing, they just wanted to come join me. But I have that background in early childhood, in dual language, in Montessori. And so I think as long as you keep an open mind to being able to support those different levels, I do regular check-ins, through their evals, just, see how things are going. But it's helpful for me because I have those additional backgrounds to kind of, help guide them, be their partner as they develop their practice and while they're in their methods classes, because it can be very big. It can be very heavy. I know I cried during my Montessori training because it was intense. And so just knowing that there is someone there who is your partner makes a big difference. Thank you.
No, thank you. I always think that doing this work of dual language education requires so much determination, strategy, collaboration, and workaround. I know many of you have stories of how you've done one of these to not manipulate in a bad way, but just being resourceful. So just to highlight some of the things she said, like having connections in the district, having a champion that can support the work, having partnerships with community colleges or universities that can support teachers training, and also being able to be flexible. I think those things are incredibly important, but also thinking about our professional standards as a whole, whether they're state level or federal, aren't always made for the dual language setting. And it's important to recognize their limitations and think about ways that we can expand those to reduce the barriers for our teachers. So I think that's great. We have 3 minutes, but I think it's okay if we extend just a little bit longer because I do want to highlight 2 more things, but it'll be more abbreviated. One of the things I want to lift up is, Carola, your work again, you do it all. So at Advance, I know you have the Language Justice Institute. I believe it just launched, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about what that is briefly so people can at least look it up?
Gracias. Thank you, Zid. Yeah, the Language Justice Institute is incredibly close to my heart, but it became as a vision with Dr. Rosemary Allen and Ana Arambula Gonzalez that we dreamed of as a dedicated space, un hogar, un espacio where we could advocate for multilingual learners in different projects. So we see that as the tesoro, the treasure at the heart of society. We need a bilingual society, and for all the reasons that we discussed today. So we founded this, Dr. Allen, Anna, and I at the Institute for Racial Equity and Excellence. And now, since we're at Advance, that's where it's housed. And what we do is we provide professional development, technical assistance to county offices, to districts, to Head Start programs, anything related to leadership development, program development, bilingual programs. What does it look like within the context in which they live, right? Policy, advocacy. But one thing I'll highlight is that we focus on speaking about not just language or dual languages or a second language. We are very explicit about mentioning that it's ASL, African American language varieties, indigenous languages, the different ways in which we communicate, our families or communities communicate with different intonations, patterns, expressions, right? That is something that we never fully mention, and then by not saying it, we're excluding. So that's what we do, and I will put the website link over there. And we have lots of resources that we've developed that might be helpful for those who are starting and thinking and designing their dual language programs.
Thank you so much. We shared the link to your website.
Oh,
so
wonderful. Gracias.
I know we're out of time, but we'll do this briefly. I cannot end the webinar without highlighting Nuestros Niños. Dina, you were one of the main developers of Nuestros Niños, and if she doesn't brag, I'll brag for her. I like doing that for people. It's one of the only professional development programs that have been evaluated through research, and so I think it's important to highlight it. We're at 1 o'clock Mountain Time, but if very briefly, can you just tell us a little bit about what is it, who is it for, and how can people learn a little bit more about it?
Well, thank you for this opportunity, Sigrid. And yes, we have worked on the Nuestros Niños program. Actually, this year, 2024, we are celebrating our 20th anniversary. We began with this work in 2004 in North Carolina. And because of this explosion, let's say, the influx of the Latino population in North Carolina and teachers there, early educators not really knowing what to do, other than teaching, using their instructional strategies for monolingual children. And also the cultural aspects of the experiences of these children were not part of something that teachers were familiar with. So that's how we began and said, what can we do? How can we help these educators and the children and families that were served? So we began by thinking about something like, okay, what it would be a 101 dual language education for dual language learners program. And that's therefore that has evolved into 2 randomized controlled trial studies to, assess the efficacy of the program, of the professional development program in changing teacher practices, which is what's one, and of course, and those changes in teacher practices were reflected in improvements in children's language and literacy and social-emotional development, which also was proved. So we were successful with that. And now we currently have our 3rd iteration of the Nuestros Niños. And now we have, revised. Of course, we have to incorporate the most recent research. And but the important piece is that it was a professional development, and now we have created a credential program. So we are offering a credential through Boston University and the University of Colorado at Denver with my colleague Christina Gilanders. So we both work side by side on this project. And so we are preparing teachers, offering a 12 credit college credits to credential to early educators who are working in the field, Boston, as I said, in Boston, in Massachusetts, and Denver, Colorado. So we're very excited of this new version of the Nuestros Niños program. Now we are also incorporating this concept of teachers working in multilingual classrooms. It's not longer, well, at least here in Massachusetts, we have multilingual children speaking other languages other than Spanish and English. And that's definitely a different situation. I don't think the research field is up to, research giving us answers to how to deal with this, multilingualism. And I'm talking about children speaking languages, many other languages, different languages. So, but we're working with that. Those are the settings that we're working in now. So the new challenges for the Nuestros Niños program now is to go into multilingual classrooms, and teachers are, I think, appreciating that very much. But the program definitely addresses the core competencies that we were discussing earlier. We start by thinking about identifying teachers' ideologies and ideas about being linguistically and culturally responsive in their work. So there are 4 courses, as I said. We are including working with families and communities, bilingual development, biliteracy development, the teaching part of teaching strategies to work with children. And the last course is really to help teachers put everything together and becoming is a teacher inquiry course in which teachers become, the researchers in their own practices in the classroom. So I'm just trying to summarize this in a very short period of time, but I appreciate the opportunity to share this yes program.
Thank you, Dina. I think it's just so helpful to have these concrete things that you can look up and use or be inspired by. I encourage anyone that has questions or would like to apply some of the things you've heard today to reach out directly to our experts. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, and I forgot something important. The program is fully online.
Oh, that is important.
Yes.
So anyone can access it, right, Dina?
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. See, that is important. With that, we'll move on to our next slide to close this up. Today's webinar was the 6th of 9 webinars. If you missed previous webinars or there's certain parts you want to go back to, please visit our website. It has all of our recordings in the past, and it's going to have all of our recordings of the future, including this one of today. We'll go to our next slide. We're going to take a break in December, so no webinar in December, but we'll pick it right back up in January. We're going to talk about family leadership and engagement. Then we're going to talk about disabilities, and finally we're going to talk about policy enablers that facilitate dual language education. So we're going to talk about it all. If you're still with us, a little silent wave to our amazing panelists. We're so grateful for you and really inspired by everything that you do. So thank you. And thank you all for listening and tuning in. We can't wait to see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day.